say what you want about Kirk Cousins. I know, Zach, you have been extremely critical for absurd reasons.
Average quarterback. You're
the
right.
guy was amazing in 2022.
How many Super Bowls he got?
I mean,
have you guys seen that quarterback show on
what do you mean?
Netflix?
Oh, I did watch the first episode last night. Awesome.
After Kirk Cousins lost a playoff game, he went home, fed the kids, bathed them, took them to bed. So you're telling me this guy's not an elite quarterback?
No,
get out of here.
The guy, so 4th in yards last year, tied 5th in touchdowns, 11-1 in one-score games, 8-0. I'm sorry, 8 game-winning drives that tied a record with Matthew Stafford. Time and time again, Kirk was clutch and came up
Clutch.
8 game-winning drives.
I mean, that game in Buffalo was unbelievable.
Yeah, but it wasn't him.
Oh my! I mean, we could go on.
This year, the one in Buffalo wasn't really him.
Look,
that was
that
the defense actually doing something for once.
All right. Hold on.
I mean, they were down by.
If you want to go,
on the road
through against the Giants, game-winning drive, Detroit game-winning touchdown to
So congrats.
KJ
So you
Osborne.
beat the Giants. Good. That's good. Then you beat Detroit. Good. All right. Any real teams that he came back against?
Buffalo.
I mean, Buffalo was a big comeback.
It was 31-14 against Buffalo.
And I thought the Giants was a great win as well. The Giants ultimately proved to be a divisional round opponent. Regardless, Kirk was good last season. And Jefferson, spectacular. Yes, he had the catch in Buffalo. The problem for the Vikings, and the problem that will continue into this season, which Jack alluded to a moment ago, is their defense was just miserable. 31st in yards allowed. Look, if this defense is average, the Vikings could legitimately be talked about as a potential Super Bowl candidate from the NFC. They'd be a top 5 team for sure. But, I mean, it was just I was at the Giants game, and I was clawing my eyes out watching that defense with Ed Donatella. It was unwatchable. If Brian Flores can come in and fix that at all, the guy's a magician. Because I have big concerns for the unit as a whole. And look, I thought this was kind of interesting. We talk a lot about stats here and numbers, PFF grades and whatnot. A lot of national media people do that. The Vikings earned a 77.6 coverage grade as a group. That would rank 7th in the NFL last year. But if you look a little closer, 29th in completion percentage allowed, 30th in passing yards allowed, 31st in explosive receptions. It was a horrible unit. That's why Patrick Peterson going to the Steelers, Jack, I don't really care about losing him. I don't really care about losing any of the guys. It was the worst defense I've ever seen.
I didn't care to gain him.
So I'm not sure. The question that I have for you guys is, will Kirk Cousins in the offense be good enough again? I don't know if you can rely on 11-0 and one-score games to overcome the defensive liability in Minnesota right now.
No, of course not, because we saw Minnesota. They're a good team. I think they're probably the second best team in the North, and a team that could probably win the North. But like you just said, the one-score games was unbelievable. Games that they very well could have lost. Games where Kirk Cousins had to go on game-winning drives. Games where they came back and to win the last 5 minutes.
Kirk was great. Without Kirk Cousins, that's a 5-win team in Minnesota last year. A 6-win
100%.
team. I mean, horrible football on the defensive side.
You can only bank on a good offense and a porous defense winning one-score games for so long, because then we just saw you lost the playoff game at home to a team you're better than.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, a bad defense or a good offense, you can't rely on that to make up for a very bad defense now.
Okay. Ziggy, what do you think? What should the expectations be in Minnesota?
This is a tricky team, because imagine you're talking to someone who doesn't know what teams we're talking about. And you say, look, there's only one team from this division that made the playoffs last year, and they won the division by 4 games. That's as many games as Kansas City won their division by. That's as many games as the Bills won their division by. That's as many games as the 49ers won their division by. Right? No team won their game by more divisions than the Vikings. And they're not the favorites, but they shouldn't be. Yeah, I mean, they got lucky in one-score games. And on many ways, I think you can expect the defense to be worse. I mean, Brian Flores, he brings a lot to the table. He's good with disguised coverages. He's great with blitzes. But you ask yourself where the most important positions are on defense. Edge rusher and cornerback. The Vikings didn't improve there. They lost the most productive edge rusher they had last year, really, in Zadarius Smith. I get that the second half of the season was bad, but I don't see a lot of reason for optimism. They've invested in the future. You know, they got Jordan Addison on the offense. They'll get Kevin O'Connell year 2. I think the offense will be just as good. But no, I don't see any reason for real optimism about this team making a run.
You know, I'll say this real quick, and then Jack, I'll let you go for a second. On offense, I do think they could be even better with Addison coming in. I expect a lot from him and Thielen. As much as we loved Adam overall in Minnesota, you could see him regressing as the season went on. I'm cautiously optimistic. That's a phrase that Vikings fans are using now. Cautiously optimistic that they could get Dalvin Cook back. I'm not sure if he's going to come, but we know there's an offer out there for him.
We don't need him.
I would like him, though, over Madison. But defensively, here's the hope. You bring in Brian Flores. Donatel was I remember driving to the playoff game, and Donatel said in an interview before, he said, you're going to like what you see on the field on Saturday. And it was the worst. I mean, it was the worst.
Was he talking to Giants fans?
No, he was talking to reporters. He was just like, we were changing up some schemes or something, and he said, you guys are going to like what you see on Sunday. And I've never seen receivers more open in my life than that playoff game. But I digress. The hope is that you bring in Brian Flores, your guy, Zach, from back in Miami.
My guy now, too.
Your guy, too. And he's supposedly he's amazing. But you have Lewis Seen, Andrew Booth, the rookie out of USC right now. A lot of young guys. Asamoah is going to be the linebacker. They bring in Davenport. There's so many young players on this defense. And look, the young guys really struggled last year. It wasn't like Lewis Seen was great before he snapped his leg in half. And Andrew Booth Jr., same thing. But you're hoping that he can mold them in a way that Donatel couldn't. And maybe if this unit does take a little bit of a jump, which, again, it can't get much worse, then they could very easily win the NFC North. It's been a bad few years defensively.
The defense just needs to be, like you said, if they can find a way to be an average defense.
Average. That's all we ask for.
Be an average defense. Because the offense is good enough.
Slightly below average.
Slightly below average is fine.
Just not piss
go
poor.
with
their quarterback.
Is it
average
too much,
quarterback,
is it too
average
much
defense.
to ask for it to line up for once? Can we ever just we had a really great defense for a few years and freaking Christian Ponder at quarterback. Now we have great offense and it's just, I don't know.
I mean, yeah, look.
I will say.
With the bad... Oh, sorry. You
go
got
ahead.
it. Well,
I was going to say, one thing I think people aren't talking about enough of this Minnesota team, just one more thing to focus on. I think the offensive line is going to be a lot better next year than it was last year. And last year was already pretty good.
That's another.
But you've got Darrisaw's ascending. Ezra Cleveland has sort of finally found his home at left guard. Ed Ingram.
About Ezra Cleveland. What do you guys say about Ed Ingram?
I was going to say Ed Ingram is a passable run blocker and maybe one of the worst pass defenders I've ever seen, but that's okay. It's on the interior. There aren't any good pass rushers on the interior in the NFC North. Look, I'm optimistic about this offensive line because they've got two excellent tackles, a functional guard. I mean, Garrett Bradbury's fine at center.
You mind if I take this
one
real quick?
Go ahead, go.
The tackles with Darrisaw and O'Neal, I will say, two of the best tackles in football. That's one of the best pairings you can have in the NFL. The interior of the Vikings offensive line. Look, run blocking, Cleveland was very good. Ingram was okay. I think Bradbury was also okay in run blocking. Pass protection, oh my God. Ezra Cleveland was tied for second most pressures allowed for a guard in the NFL. He had 55. Ed Ingram was on track to set the record for most pressures allowed in the history of football last year. He allowed 63 pressures. He was horrible, unwatchable. I mean, this is the bullshit that Kirk has to deal with. The interior Vikings O-line was allowed, I think, by far the most combined pressures in the league. And Bradbury took a step forward from trash to slightly less trash. I mean, I am fed up with it. We never address it. Look.
Oh, just give it a year, man. Just give it a year, man.
Here's the kicker. It's the most optimistic we've been on the offensive line in like 6 years. So we have to take it.
You know what's so
Don't
funny?
say here's the kicker when you're talking about the Vikings.
Yeah, please.
The Vikings is like the Mets.
It is.
You're just had a 13-3 season, mopped the NFC North, and now you are ranting about.
I mean, look at the Mets.
We're doomed.
Knock down the wild card.
Oh no, it's the same
boom,
thing.
Boom, boom, they're gone.
Same thing.
All right, so there you go.
This team is in zero state right now to beat a good, well-rounded team in the NFC, like Dallas,
like the Eagles,
or Philly, or San Francisco.
Well, you saw what happened. When we played Eagles and Dallas, we got murdered.
If you play a good defense that can contain you, and a good offense like Dallas, they're going to score 40 points.
Until the defense gets average, you could forget about the Vikings as a Super Bowl contender. The NFC North, and now with all that said, the NFC North is in range. Go ahead, Ziggy. Close up.
I was going to say, Jack, I think you're spot on that the Vikings are not in position to beat a well-rounded NFC contender. But unless the Lions defense takes a big step forward, there is no well-rounded contender in the NFC North. So I think if you're looking for reasons that the Vikings can win the division, that's it right there.
Yeah, they could.
Everyone else sucks.
Oh, they could win the North. Yeah, they could win the North. They definitely could.
Right. I apologize for that little rant there. I've been waiting to get that off my chest for a while.